We've talked about NFL teams with the easiest and hardest schedules, but we can, and we will, get more specific than that. What NFL teams have faced the easiest slate of offenses? Defenses. Same question, but in the other direction. Who's faced the hardest offenses? Defenses. Today, we will be tackling the teams that have faced the easiest offenses, and we will be doing that through the use of C-score. This channel's metric that was designed to fully evaluate each and every team of the Super Bowl era beyond just looking at its record. C-score is also broken down into offensive and defensive components, which of course will serve us well for this particular video. For a deeper dive into how all this works, be sure to check out the description of this video. We're doing this just as we have done it in the past. We take the average offensive C-score of every matchup on a team's regular season schedule. The lower that average registers, the higher that team will be ranked. Thank you for joining us today. Please help out the channel by liking, sharing, subscribing, and digging that notification bell. Let's roll. Starting us off at number 25 are the 2018 Houston Texans. This was a good Texans team with an 11-5 record, a plus 86 point differential, and a top 5 ranking in points allowed. They land a C-score of 9.815. As we look at their breakdown, let's explain what we're looking at here. Beneath 2018 is the Texans' defensive C-score of 5.398. We still have their 3 hardest offensive opponents alongside their 3 easiest, with an asterisk indicating an opponent they faced twice. Taking a look at New England here, for example, that 9.573 represents their offensive C-score, while that number in parentheses, 17.467, represents their overall C-score. This is going to be the breakdown for every team going forward. We can see Houston never faced an offense in the double-digit range, but they had several double-digit negatives, including 2 matchups with the sub-20 Jacksonville Jaguars. The average offensive C-score for their schedule this season lands at negative 5.441. At number 24 are the 2011 Cincinnati Bengals, a perfectly slightly above average team at 9-7 and a total C-score of 1.383. Their defensive C-score is even closer to average, just getting above the plus line at 0.322. They did face some rather reasonably difficult opponents here. The Ravens at 6.727, they played them twice, along with the 49ers and the Texans. What's hurting them here are the easiest offenses they played, especially the St. Louis Rams, and twice playing the Cleveland Browns. All that put together gives the Bengals an average offensive opponent this season at negative 5.515. Back to the 20th century we go for our number 23 entry, the 1975 Los Angeles Rams. This was an excellent team, 12-2 with a plus 177 point differential and an awesome C-score of 24.875. And this unit was led by their defense, as indicated by that defensive C-score of 20.87. Now, if you look at this comparison between hardest and easiest, it does seem to balance. Pittsburgh, the Colts, and Dallas, all double-digit teams, whereas New Orleans, San Diego, and Chicago are all negative double-digit teams. 2 matchups with the Saints, and a lot of fluff in the middle is what brings the Rams down here. Their average opponent this season comes out to a very clean-looking number here, negative 5.678. At number 22, we have the 2005 Carolina Panthers. This group went 11-5 with a plus 132 point differential and made it to the NFC Championship game. Their C-score is 15.563, and they were mostly balanced with their defensive C-score coming in at 8.099. They only had 2 different opponents on their schedule with a positive offensive C-score. The Patriots at just under 9, and their division rival Atlanta Falcons at around 3.5. Another division rival, the New Orleans Saints, kicked in at -16, and they had 2 other games at negative double digits. All told, the average offensive opponent for this season's Panthers comes in at -5.702. We've talked before how the 1979 season tilted heavily in favor of the AFC. This number 21 entry here from the 79 Chicago Bears is one of the reasons why. They did go 10-6 and outscored their opponents by 57 points, but their strength of schedule brings their C-score down to 2.004. Their defense did do the heavy lifting though with a C-score of 7.455. The issue here is that their 3 easiest opponents were all from within the NFC Central: the Lions, Packers, and Vikings. No such divisional opponent appears on their hardest side, but the Patriots, Cowboys, and the Jets are at least all in the positive realm. Altogether, the average offensive opponent for this season's Bears clocks in at -5.728. We break into the top 20 during an era when the NFC West was the NFC worst. These are the 2007 Arizona Cardinals. Despite going 8-8 with a slightly positive point differential, their C-score is well into the negatives at -8.291. Their defense was the main culprit here, coming in at 11.594, despite playing this simple slate of opponents. Cleveland was their hardest offensive opponent this year at just over 7 points, while the Saints and the Lions do manage positive scores. On the easy side of things though, 2 matchups each with the 49ers and the Rams drag this down tremendously, along with a matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. However, this Cardinal team does not yet break the -6 point barrier, with their average opponent coming in at -5.797. We've got another Rams team from the 1970s here at number 19 with the 1977 squad. Yet another powerhouse Ram team of the 70s. This group went 10-4 with a point differential of +156, which is more than 11 points per game. Their C-score is 24.047, with their defensive C-score coming in at 13.462. This slate of opponents is almost single-handedly saved by their one matchup with the Oakland Raiders and their offensive C-score of nearly 23 points. Unfortunately for LA, they faced a lot of easy teams here, including the 2 Bay teams and 2 matchups with the Atlanta Falcons. Altogether now, the average offensive C-score for this group comes in at -5.803. It's the Rams again, but we're heading to an entirely different decade. At number 18 are the Super Bowl champion 1999 St. Louis Rams. This team somehow lost 3 games despite outscoring their opponents by nearly 300 points. Their total C-score was 33.597, and while this team was certainly known for its offense, it did carry a good defensive C-score of 10.604. They only faced 2 different opponents all season with an offensive C-score higher than 1. The Tennessee Titans, who they rematched in the Super Bowl, and the Carolina Panthers, who were in their division, and they got to play them twice. On the easy side of things, a matchup with the expansion Cleveland Browns, 2 matchups with the New Orleans Saints, and 1 with the emergent but not yet there Philadelphia Eagles dragged this team down. The previous entry saw the Rams' opponents check in at -5.803. This team is just ahead of them at -5.804. Our next entry gives us the Super Bowl champion from the season before. At number 17 are the 1998 Denver Broncos. This was the second consecutive and better of the 2 Bronco championships of this decade, with this group going 14-2, outscoring their opponents by nearly 200 points and putting together a C-score of 33.676. And like the Rams before them, this team had a better defense than you might remember, but their C-score is just barely over 7 at 7.027. The Jacksonville Jaguars was the hardest offensive opponent they faced all season, and they couldn't crack 9 points. They do have 3 different opponents in the double-digit negatives, including 2 matchups with the Chargers and 1 against the dreadful Eagles. The average offensive C-score for this 98 Broncos team is negative 5.864. After looking at back-to-back entries with Super Bowl champions, we now come across a franchise that has yet to win a Super Bowl, with the 1975 Minnesota Vikings proving no exception. In fact, this team didn't even make it to the Super Bowl, despite being 12-2 with a plus 197 point differential and a 24.079 C-score. This was the purple people eater era of the Vikings, so you know their defensive C-score was excellent at 15.479. They had one matchup with the excellent Buffalo Bills and their offensive C-score of over 23. Washington was the only other team they faced with a positive offensive C-score. A whole lot of double-digit negatives on the easy side of things, the worst of which are the New Orleans Saints at nearly negative 21. We have now broken the negative 6 point barrier, with the 75 Vikings coming in at negative 6.058. This channel isn't shy about talking about the Colts and their luck as a franchise, and at number 15 are the 2018 Indianapolis Colts. This was a 5-6 team that didn't quite outscore their opponents by 100 points, putting together a C-score of 8.185. The strength of this team was clearly in its offense, because the defense comes in the negatives at negative 0.983. Their top 3 hardest opponents faced did all have positive C-scores, including the Houston Texans, who they got to play twice. They also, like the Houston Texans, who led off this countdown, got to play the sub-20 Jacksonville Jaguars twice. A matchup with the Buffalo Bills and the Oakland Raiders doesn't help matters, giving this Colts team an average offensive opponent C-score of negative 6.164. Wouldn't you know it, we've got back-to-back Colts entries. At number 14 are the Baltimore Colts, in fact the final Baltimore Colts team from 1983. They did go 7-9, but that's deceptive when you look at that negative 90 point differential. C-score will bear that out, putting them at negative 16.069. The defense was less of a problem this year, but they were still very much in the negatives at minus 6.091. They only faced one opponent all season with a positive offensive C-score, but that was the Miami Dolphins, who they did face twice. Their next hardest opponent were the Cleveland Browns at negative 0.7 and change. On the easy side of things, Philly led the way with that negative 17, but 2 different matchups with the New England Patriots and the Denver Broncos, despite not being in the same division, really dragged this thing down. In total, the average offensive opponent the Colts faced this season had a C-score of negative 6.178. The midway point of our countdown gives us yet another team of the NFC worst era. At number 13 are the 2007 Seattle Seahawks. Despite double-digit victories and a triple-digit positive point differential, this team could only put together a C-score of 5.661, and that's because their strength of schedule was so easy. We're going to demonstrate how easy it was on the offensive side here. They do have a defensive C-score of a palindrome of 2.772. Just like the Cardinals from earlier, their hardest opponent this year were the Cleveland Browns. They also had matchups with the New Orleans Saints and the Cincinnati Bengals, but that is more than offset with 2 matchups against the 49ers, 2 matchups against the Rams, and a matchup against the Falcons. Not too pretty here. The average opponent for the Seahawks this season had a C-score on the offensive side of negative 6.241. At number 12, we have our 3rd Super Bowl champion on the list, and also we have a candidate for the greatest defense in NFL history. This, of course, are the 2000 Baltimore Ravens. They went 12-4, plus 168 point differential, and of course, as we mentioned, they were Super Bowl champions. Their total C-score was 30.338, a number that was almost exclusively derived from their defense, which checked in at 27.057. Now, despite their dominance, and make no question, this team was dominant, they did face an easy slate of opponents. Their top two hardest matchups were within the division, the Jaguars and the Titans, and they also had a matchup with the Jets who couldn't quite hit 2.5 points. Also within the division, though, was the Ohio connection of the Browns and the Bengals, with these two matchups combining for more than negative 80 points in C-score. Another matchup with the Cardinals at near negative 17 doesn't help. Again, to reiterate, this was a dominant defense, but we must take into consideration their offensive opponents this season. That offensive opponent averaged out at negative 6.342. At the edge of the top 10, at number 11, are the 2002 Philadelphia Eagles. They went 12-4, plus 174 on the point differential, and made it to the second of their 4 consecutive NFC Championship game appearances. Only an easy strength of schedule kept the C-score from being even higher at 20.746. The defense did its part here for the most part, 8.306. They did not face anybody with a C-score higher than 3.5 points. San Francisco, Tennessee, and Tampa Bay are all bunched together here between 3.223 and 2.756. They did face some easy opponents though. Leading the way are the expansion Houston Texans at almost negative 20. 2 matchups with the Cowboys and a matchup with their former division rival Cardinals made this a pretty easy path for Philly. Their average offensive opponent here was at negative 6.365. We will now enter the top 10, and we do so with another squad from 1975, specifically again from the NFC West. These are the San Francisco 49ers. They did win 5 out of 14 games and only got outscored by 31 points, but their C-score still hit double digits, negative double digits, at minus 11.954. The defense wasn't as good as the offense, in a manner of speaking. They check in at negative 7.18. They did have some opponents here on the positive side of things. Minnesota was the toughest at 8.6, 2 matchups with the Rams at just over 4, and a matchup with the Houston Oilers at almost 2.5. But they did face a lot of easy opponents here. Once again, the 1975 New Orleans Saints show up, 2-time opponents, with the Giants and the Bears combining to go under negative 26. The average opponent for the 49ers this season, negative 6.559. Our number 9 team on the list are the 1992 San Diego Chargers. To this day, the only team to ever start an NFL season 0-4 and still make it to the playoffs. They did so with a C-score of 9.944 and with a defensive C-score of 4.436. They also did it by only facing 2 different opponents with a positive offensive C-score. The hardest of the group were the Kansas City Chiefs, who they played twice, and a matchup with the Houston Oilers, who just cleared 8 points. Their next hardest were the Pittsburgh Steelers, finding themselves in the negatives. What brings them down here real hard were 2 matchups against the Seattle Seahawks at almost negative 26.5 points. They also had 2 matchups with the Indianapolis Colts, who weren't even in their division. That brings the average opponent for the Chargers this season on the offensive side at negative 6.581. It's the 70s again. It's the NFC West again. At number 8 are the 1977 New Orleans Saints. But this is a pretty bad team. They went 3-11, got outscored by more than 100 points, and put up a C-score of negative 25.07. And while this team's offense was okay, the defense was quite dreadful at negative 24.052. Saving them from maybe a top 5 appearance here are 2 matchups with the LA Rams and their offensive C-score in the positive double digits. On the easy side of things though, 2 matchups with the Falcons, 1 with the Packers, and 1 with one of the absolute worst offenses of all time, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That gives the New Orleans Saints an average offensive opponent of almost -7, specifically at -6.943. Lucky number 7 are the 1970 Miami Dolphins. This was Miami's first good season by going 10-4 and making it to the playoffs with a barely positive C-score at 0.751. The strength here was the defense with a score of 4.522. Their toughest opponent this season were the Baltimore Colts, and they did play them twice. They also played the Oakland Raiders. Nobody else on their schedule checked in with an offensive C-score of higher than 1. But plenty of teams checked in with negative C-scores, including 2 divisional opponents, the Boston Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. One more matchup with the New Orleans Saints also drags this down. This team from 1970, coming in at number 7, will break the -7 point barrier, with their average offensive opponent coming in at -7.151. We've got 7s coming at us from everywhere, and number 6 are the 1977 Chicago Bears. They were more games above 500 this year at +4 than they were at point differential at +2. That easy strength of schedule brings their C-score down to -6.098. The defense bore the brunt of this and then some, coming in at -8.356. They somehow faced 2 different opponents this season with double-digit offensive C-scores in the Rams and the Oilers. Well, they did plenty of that on the defensive side as well. A matchup with the Falcons, a matchup with the Buccaneers, and 2 with the Green Bay Packers. This dragged them down tremendously. Their average offensive opponent this year had a C-score of -7.51. To begin the top 5, we look at the 2000 Philadelphia Eagles. This is our second Eagles entry from a 3-year span. This was the breakout year for Philly, going 11-5, putting together a +106 point differential, and grabbing themselves a C-score of 10.779. That was almost exclusively driven by the defense, where they come in at 8.261. They only faced 1 opponent this season with an offensive C-score higher than 5, and they only faced 2 opponents with an offensive C-score higher than 1. None of those teams were from their division, whereas one of their 3 easiest opponents this year, the still in the NFC East Arizona Cardinals, at -16.69. They also had those 2 matchups with the Ohio Connection, the Browns and the Bengals. That gave Philly a very low score on the average offensive opponent here. It comes in at -7.606. We've seen 3 Super Bowl champions to this point in the countdown. We now welcome our first team that made it to the Super Bowl but did not win it. At number 4 are the 1991 Buffalo Bills. This, of course, was the second of 4 consecutive losses. They went 13-3, outscored their opponents by 140 points, and got a C-score of 14.623. The defense was a bit of a concern here, with that score coming in at -4.136, helping them along the way, not having to face too many great offensive teams. The Lions and the Chiefs were the only teams to clear 4 points, and they didn't do so by much. Miami, from within their division, gave them a score of 2.5. Also within their division, the truly dreadful Indianapolis Colts and the pretty darn dreadful New England Patriots. Tampa Bay adds to the misery here. The Bills' average offensive opponent in 1991 carried with them a C-score of -7.743. After we saw the 1970 Miami Dolphins, we knew we'd have to see the 1970 Baltimore Colts. They take the number 3 spot here. They are the last Super Bowl champion we're going to see on the countdown. They went 11-2-1, couldn't get to a triple-digit point differential, and only carry a C-score of 10.698. The defense only cleared 2 points by a little bit here, 2.305. They faced one opponent all season, one time, with a positive offensive C-score, the San Diego Chargers. Their next hardest opponent were the Chicago Bears, and they were in the negatives. They did have a not-so-terrible third easiest opponent in the Oilers, but they had two matchups within the division with the Patriots and the Bills. With everything else in the middle here not so great, the average opponent for this season's Baltimore Colts breaks the negative 8-point barrier at negative 8.026. Our number 2 entry belongs to one of the absolute worst teams to ever make the playoffs, even though they won a game in those playoffs, the 1998 Arizona Cardinals. They only went 9-7 against the league's easiest schedule, still managing to get outscored by 53 points. All that added up to a C-score of negative 15.356. And while they had a pretty good offense, their defense not so much, as indicated by this C-score of negative 13.28. They did not face anybody this entire season with a C-score on the offensive side higher than 3 points. 2 regular season matchups with the Cowboys at 2.5 and change, and one with the Seahawks at just under 2, represent their only opponents who were in the positives. On the negative side, a matchup with the Chargers, 2 with the Giants, and 2 with the dreadful Eagles make it patently obvious how easy this Cardinals defense had it. How easy exactly? Their average offensive opponent had a C-score of negative 8.546. But one team managed to have it even easier. Taking the top spot here are the 1979 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Certainly one of the best Cinderella stories of the entire Super Bowl era. This Bucs team does have a dose of reality that it has to deal with. They went 10-6, played the league's easiest schedule, and had a C-score of negative 3.999. They did make it to the NFC Championship game on the strength of a good defense, which put up a C-score themselves of 5.055. But look at this slate of opponents. Only one team checks in with a positive C-score. That's the New Orleans Saints, and they could not clear 5. Their second hardest opponent were the Rams, and their offensive C-score was negative 3.343. Looking at their easiest opponents, they were all teams they faced twice, the Lions, Giants, and Packers. None of these scores are egregiously low, but the lack of any quality is what brings this all the way to the number 1 spot on the countdown. The average offensive opponent for the 1979 Tampa Bay Buccaneers is a lowly negative 8.877. As we have done in earlier countdowns, we are discounting the 1982 season, not just because it had only 9 games, but because teams did not always play their divisional opponents twice. That said, the 1982 Pittsburgh Steelers and Chicago Bears would have otherwise made this list. That would have bumped out the 2018 Texans and the 2011 Cincinnati Bengals. I'm sure those two teams would have appreciated that. Let me know what you think about all of this. Were there any trends that you noticed? Certainly some seasons represented themselves more often than others, with many years, including those from the 70s and 2007 and whatnot, making multiple appearances. Was there a team you expected to see on this list that you did not? Was there a team you did see that you didn't think would make it? Sound off on these topics or anything else you may have on your mind down in the comments section below. I did want to reiterate something we've posted on the channel earlier. We have hit 5,000 subscribers, and for that I'm extremely thankful. We do have a post where you can ask any question regarding the channel, but if you want to ask those questions in the comment section of this video, I'll look at those as well. Thank you once again for taking the time to join us today, and until next time, I hope you have an awesome day.